morning. We're just starting. And I think I'll just talk about this week before I talk about yeast breads. So this week, tomorrow, there is a breads worksheet. It looks like a quiz because I did it on Schoology. And so you'll see a puzzle piece that looks like the quiz, but it's not a quiz. It's a formative worksheet. It's multiple choice true and false on quick and yeast breads. And then to find answers, there's the chapter. I took a picture of each page of our book and put it into a folder. And then you could use the function of ingredient notes and these yeast bread notes for answers. Wednesday is our fourth chart. That is knead, and then you'll see like chop, slice, dice, because next week we go into fruits and vegetables. So that's why you'll see words that are coming up with the units we're doing. On Thursday, then there's a video that I made yesterday, as I said to some people that were early on, of me kneading the dough. You could make it into the pizza recipe, which I attached. I made mine into cinnamon rolls. You can use that. It's a basic yeast dough. So you can use it even just to make regular rolls. I will tell you that if you're going to make a whole loaf of bread, you probably want to double it. Or if you're going to make, the recipe that I did made about 6 cinnamon rolls. So just a square pan. If you want to do a regular cake pan, then you probably need to double the recipe. But if you aren't able to do that for Friday's lab, there are options for using like crescent rolls, or getting the biscuits in the tube, the crescent rolls in the tube in the refrigerator section. Because right now, with so many people making their own bread and products at home, you can't find yeast. I haven't found it in the grocery store in Cub. Now, my neighbor said she found it at Aldi, so maybe if you shop at Aldi, you could find it there. It's kind of hit or miss. So on Thursday, then, there's that video. There's the video on the Magic Marshmallow Crescent Puffs. I made those last week and recorded it. And then I found just a couple of other clips on how to knead bread dough. So that's for Thursday, and then Friday is the yeast bread lab. So that's where we are this week. Then I'm going to switch and talk about yeast breads. And it looks like a lot of notes here, but actually I'm not going to read this word for word because I know that it's Monday morning and you don't want to listen to all this either. But just some information. A lot of the ingredients are the same as they were in quick breads, and a lot of them have the same purpose. Flour, as you remember, is the structure of the framework. The protein part is the gluten, the elastic strands. Liquid, I said this in my video yesterday, the water, you want to have 110 to 125 degrees to dissolve your yeast. Yeast, as you see on the next one, is the leavening agent which makes your dough rise. We've used baking soda and baking powder so far in cookies and in our quick breads. Now we're using yeast. It is a fungus. It kind of smells when you dissolve the yeast packet into the water. I always tell students it kind of smells not a good smell, kind of like stinky feet smell. That process is what that darkened line says there. The breakdown of sugar into carbon dioxide and alcohol by the yeast is called fermentation. And you might have had that word in science, or fermenting grapes. It gives off this smell. Sugar, we already know, it browns and it adds flavor. It is food for the yeast. So there's a teaspoon of sugar in the recipe. And then fats on the bottom, and it comes now on the next page. It makes the bread tender and helps keep the bread soft, same as it did in quick breads. Eggs have lots of property, flavor, structure, color. Makes the crumbs fine, the crust more tender. There's a little bit of salt in your recipe to control the action of the yeast so it doesn't rise too fast. Then there are different methods to mixing yeast doughs. Last week I talked about the mixing methods of the quick breads, which were the biscuit and the muffin method. Our book is going to tell you the conventional and the quick mixing methods. Conventional would be the same as my straight dough, where all your ingredients are combined, the dough is kneaded, and it's set aside to rise. That's what I did yesterday with my cinnamon rolls. The sponge method, if you've ever watched anything on the Food Network, is where they mix up the dough, it rises, and then they punch it down, and it rises again. Sometimes they'll even punch it a second time and let it rise. And then there's one that's called batter or no knead, and it's exactly what it says. You mix up the batter, the dough, but you don't have to knead it, and you set it aside to rise. Kneading of the dough is a 3-step method: push, fold, and turn. You push with the palms of your hands, fold, and turn, and you'll see both in my videos and the clips, you need to put some flour down on your cutting board, and you have to put flour on your hands because otherwise that sticky dough is going to stick right to your hands. And then I was talking about this in the video too, ways to tell if you've kneaded it long enough. And you do have to knead. It was about 5 minutes with mine. 5 to 8 minutes is usually what you need. You can pick up the dough and you can see that it gets more smooth and satiny. You can hold it in your hand, and I had that one in the example in my video clip yesterday. You drop it. If it sticks, mine needed to go a little bit farther. You can stretch it to see bubbles, or you can use the indent, which is one that a lot of people use. If it stays in the dough and doesn't come springing back out, then you know it's kneaded enough. And then the last thing was just some tips for making a loaf of bread. You can place it in a greased loaf pan, and just like you'd make the banana bread, that kind of pan. And to test for doneness, it's not like a cake, because obviously if you're making a loaf of bread, it's really high, so a toothpick isn't going to work. If you know the toothpick test, where you put the toothpick in the thickest part of your cake, and if it comes out clean, that's good. If not, you have to put it in longer. Well, obviously you can't do that with a loaf of bread. So color, of course, is one way, and the other way is you tap it and it sounds hollow. Now that's hard when you're a new baker and haven't made a lot of breads to know if it sounds hollow, but it is a distinct, it's kind of like if you've ever heard the old wise tale about knocking on a watermelon if it sounds hollow. It's the same kind of effect and it's just a little tap on a loaf of bread. So I'll come back here. Now I went through that really fast. Can anybody tell me then what are some differences between a quick bread and a yeast bread? Anything with the ingredients that are different than what we talked about last week, or what you learned about in a quick bread versus what's happening this week in a yeast bread? Anybody have ideas of what that might be, the difference between the two? Well, one of the main difference would be with your rising, right? Because I said we're using yeast, which comes in a little packet, versus baking soda, baking powder, which was what we've used in cookies, what we used in quick breads. Now we're using yeast this week. And I mentioned too this in the video, that yeast comes in a packet, but you can also get it in a jar. And you can also get it in the refrigerator department in a compressed block. So if you don't see those little packets, you might see it in a jar, and then it'll tell you right on the jar, but it's 2 1/4 teaspoons is how much is in one of those little packets. So if you're going to use that to make something this week, you know, and it tells you on the jar what the difference is. Another difference is what we're kneading. We're kneading the dough versus just mixing it up. Some of you may have the dough hook attachment. Now I mixed mine by hand yesterday, even though I have the KitchenAid dough hook. I just think it comes together a little bit easier, but if you want to use it, you sure can. The other things that would be different would be maybe the sugar feeding your yeast and the salt slowing down the process. Has anybody made any homemade pizza dough or bread or anything? What have you made? Has anybody tried kneading dough before? Julia, you've made biscuits, rolls, was it? It was buns, wasn't it? You said had texted me or sent me a message about. Oh wow, you made a lot. Rolls, buns, and pizza dough. I actually did homemade pizza dough last week. There's nothing better. I think once you make homemade pizza dough, it's much better than your frozen. Anybody else make anything with yeast or doughs? No? Does anybody have questions about this week, any of the assignments? Just remember that one tomorrow. And I've opened it all up, so you can go ahead and work on the chart for Wednesday. You can do the worksheet. You can watch videos. It should be all open. I'll check again after we leave here, but I think I opened it all last night, so you should be good to go. Does anybody have questions before we sign off today? Okay. Well, have a good week. People are telling me they want me to come on the first day of the week. I think it just helps them think about the week, and what they have to do. So you'll see me next Monday again. Feel free to send me messages or email me if you have any questions. Have a good week, and I'll see you next Monday. Take care, everybody.